Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Well, welcome back to Big Brave Business. I am so excited to have this conversation because you know what? Things are crazy and chaotic in the world right now. And it's hard. And I'm seeing a lot of posts and conversation about the economy and feeling people who run businesses looking for other jobs and people stressing about client turnover. People have less spend available, etc. So the economy is kind of on a lot of business owners' minds this year. And I think that it ebbs and flows. There are going to be times where this is the topic of conversation that is coming up. But also one thing I've noticed is that literally no one feels confident that they are an expert about how to handle economic fluctuations in their businesses. So it's also a scary conversation. So I think that in the name of Big Brave Business, this is going to be a really good topic. But before we get too far into the actual conversation, let's introduce you to the people who are here today so you know who you're listening to. And just to reiterate, everyone's bio and their links is in the description of the episode so you can connect with all or any of us. But I'll start. I am Sarah. I'm the host of this podcast. If you're new here, welcome. I also run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media.
I'm Valerie Crafton. I'm with Val Consultants and work in the high tech and construction industry.
I'm Erica Alexander of Abundant Outcomes, and I work with individuals, families, and organizations to build financial resiliency into their behavior.
I'm Katrina Mitchum, founder of Katrina Mitchum Learning Design, and I help service-based businesses create courses like they give a shit.
And I'm Becky Mollenkamp. I'm a feminist business coach, and I was a bit distracted because I sent my mom to pick up my son from school and she couldn't find him, but everything's okay now. So I'm here now.
Oh gosh. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad he's been found. So let's go ahead and get into the big question today, which is how can businesses recession-proof their operations and build financial resilience in uncertain times?
That's a big question.
There's a lot there.
Brave. Very brave.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of folks, like I said, in the construction and high tech industry, and because of that, a lot of manufacturing and what have you. So it's been really interesting to watch the tariffs come through and watch a lot of these supply chains impact us in my industry. And of course, comes with that is layoffs and uncertainty and projects get put on hold. Everybody's sort of in this uncertain space where you feel like you've taken 2 steps, but then you go take 3 steps back. And do we go? Do we not go? And one of the successful ways that I have witnessed this happen is really just making sure that you have that balance within your business. I often see folks, at least in my world, balance out the markets they actually go after. So when the public is spending and things are great, awesome. But when the public isn't spending, who is? Well, typically government contracts go up. And so a lot of civil road work and so forth. So if you've got both of those markets going on, you don't have to necessarily pivot so quickly when recessions happen. You just know that this part of your business is now going to be a little bit on fire compared to the other end. So for me, in my perspective, that's kind of how I've watched folks. It's really just kind of balance out and not have all their eggs in one basket and see how they can spread that bench a little smoother.
Yeah, Val, I was thinking, because I am not the expert here, we're just going to put that out there, that multiple streams, and it doesn't have to be like multiple streams that make you hustle, right? But multiple places where your income is coming in. And I do it now. I still adjunct, right? I still teach a class every once in a while. And so if things go south for me, I'll pick up an extra class, because when we hit recessions, one thing is for sure, people go back to higher education because they want to upskill. I think that's the only definite. Will they go back to higher education this time? I don't know, because I think there's a lot of mistrust, but that might be a whole other podcast episode, Sarah. I think people people are going to want to be learning, because in recessions, people also lose their jobs, not just entrepreneurs losing business. And so there's potential opportunity there.
I always see it as a time where you can pause and start to build. Right. This is the time when you can start training your teams, start organizing your processes. It's a downtime that allows you to reset. Yeah, things aren't as great as they are, but if you start throwing mud at the wall and going after cookies, and when you're a bread maker, you're probably not going to be that great at it. And it's going to impact the overall reputation of your business. People are like, who are you and what are you doing?
Yes.
So, or you can use this time to reset, to train your people and be ready for when things go on fire again, you all hit the ground running. I've always found that to be a really great time to do it.
I agree, Valerie. As a person who's worked as a consultant before, I agree with being versatile and well-rounded. So I have worked a lot in the aerospace community here in Arizona. And what I found is when aerospace is waning, a lot of my colleagues, some of which who went to school specifically for aerospace engineering, right? That's a very specific field. So they just kind of don't know what to do. And so they would always be mystified. They'd be like, well, how'd you end up working there? Because I know that there's something there that I can do. I mean, and I have, my background is in computer science, so it's a lot broader. I've worked in lots of different industries. However, something that you said, Valerie, that I think that is at the crux of this issue a bit, well, I should say a lot, because I've had a lot of experience in this personally, is we underestimate how much it costs us to run our businesses and run our lives. So we really need to get more savvy about reserves, contingency, because even your statement about it's a good time to reset, kind of to look internally, do an assessment of where the skills are and where the gaps are and make investments there. But investments require investment. And so if you don't have access to cash, if you don't have access to a line of credit, then you can really get stuck in that scenario.
Yeah, that's kind of the first thing that came up for me when you said that, Val, is like, you can invest in training your team if you have money to pay them. And that feels really stressful for folks who are less established, because I think that the goal, and I think that we could all agree this would be like a great goal to have, would be to have financial reserves in place so that when you have fluctuations in income, you aren't as dependent on that income right away, that you've got some money to be able to pay your team. And I think that's one strategy, right? Is trying to make sure you're putting money away. And this is something that I didn't hear as somebody who was starting a business in kind of like the sort of general coaching in the world. I heard a lot of people with personal finance saying you should have an emergency fund, right? But I didn't hear that advice about running a business for the first like couple of years that I was running my business, until I heard someone say it for the first time, like, just like you need however many months saved, or it's recommended that you have a couple of months saved for reserves for yourself personally, you should also have that for your business. And that was like a light bulb moment for me, honestly, of, oh, wow. I mean, I can really see how that would create a much bigger comfort zone. But for me, where I'm at in my business, this is my 6th year. I'm coming up on 6, celebrating my 6th anniversary. And like, I am talking months, not years. So as far as reserves go, I mean, like, it's still a very fine. So when we think of recession, I don't think of that being like, here's a little bump in the road where you just have to cover yourself for a minute. I think of like, this could be big, right? This could be extended. And so I don't have a year of reserves to run my business. That's what's coming up for me.
Right. No, Sarah. So I have real life experience of during the 08, 09-ish era of recessions. I went back east to take a job with a former customer who was more than when the work sort of dried up here in the valley. It was a lot easier for me to reach back on the East Coast and look. And so I go and work with a familiar customer. I'm working with a small firm that's an offshoot from someone that I had worked with at this small customer for years before. I'm there for maybe a month when the customer calls all of us consultants who were there working for them and said, hey, this client hasn't paid us in like 6 months. And so if they don't pay us in 3 days, I mean, I'm serious, it wasn't even a full week, we're not going to be able to pay you. What? I'm across the country. This is ungood at best. And so I have seen how really lean operations, and this unfortunately wasn't an uncommon narrative. I heard especially small consulting companies who had government clients or were subcontractors to larger government contractors. If the government does not pay in their regular cadence, if there's any sort of glitch and they are strapped for credit, sometimes they have to do really weird, and I've heard weird scenarios. I'm not going to share any here, but sometimes they have to take really, really risky options. And so when I work with people, and I do work with some small business owners, and just in general, we tend to underestimate what can happen, right? Although we have lived through it several times. So this is the thing that's kind of it's challenging for me. We've lived through the Great Recession. We've lived through Corona, and now we're living through tariffs. So it's like, so how many times do we have to have these experiences to really understand the necessity of having reserves? Yes, things can work out greatly, but wouldn't you love to have an extra $10,000, $20,000 instead of trying to scrape together $20,000, $50,000 worth of credit to pay suppliers and employees? Such a stressful situation to put ourselves in.
And Sarah, to speak to like that, it feels overwhelming thing, because that's how I always felt. And I've been self-employed for 20 years. So I worked through the Great Recession as well, and it nearly ended me and survived. And I've been through lots of blips since. And I resisted that for a really long time of like, mostly just out of this, I don't know, it feels too big and overwhelming to think about how do I ever get to $20,000 or $30,000 set aside, right? And what worked for me is profit first. It doesn't work for everyone. But for me, that was a really great method of accounting that sort of forced my hand, where I have separate accounts and automatically put money into an account that is for profits, or in my case, I use that usually as more of my reserve. And so having a system, whatever that system looks like for you, whether it's profit first or something else, but developing a system that makes it where it's $50 at a time, it's $100 at a time. It's these smaller amounts that you don't even really notice in the moment, so that it builds up to that, is really helpful. And obviously, when we're already maybe in a recession or moving towards one rapidly, it can be impossible. If you don't have reserves, you don't have reserves. Like, it's important to start building them because guess what? This is going to happen again. Like you said, Erica, like it happens. I've lived through enough of them that I recognize this is just what happens. And part of it is a reset. And so like, just thinking of it like this is just the economy resetting, and it's going to be okay because we'll get through this, because we always have. But when you're already in it, the idea of setting aside reserves feels like, well, I can't even I can't pay the bills. So in those moments, I think about like efficiencies as well. How can you get more efficient what you're doing? Look at your tech stack. Are there things that you could cut or combine, or is there another tool that can start to save money? A lot of those things are small amounts, but sometimes those can add up. I think it's a great time, like Valerie said, to like just do this like deep clean of your business and to go through everything you're spending on and think about the necessity of that in this moment. Is it something that you could push pause on? A lot of things actually allow you to literally push pause on a subscription service, and you can come back to that and reevaluate in 6 months. Looking for ways that you can do what you're doing more efficiently, not because you want to try and be a robot, but because you're trying to find ways to cut back on expenses. And I think that can be really important. And I'll just say one other thing really quickly too, because Valerie, I guess, and Katrina mentioned like the having multiple revenue streams. I think another thing is to just meet people where they are in the moment. So I think it's important in these moments to reevaluate, how are people spending? Because it's not that there's no people spending. People are spending, but how are they spending? Perhaps it's changed. Maybe they're not willing to put as much money out at front as they used to, right? Maybe they're not willing to spend on a giant package. Because everyone's kind of feeling that tension around money, they're spending smaller amounts, right? They're spending a little bit less up front. Or maybe they need a longer payment plan. So how can you meet your clients where they are and use this as an opportunity to either come up with new kinds of offers or just change the way you're approaching your offer so that you meet the needs that they have at this moment around money?
I love that, Becky, because for a couple of reasons. One, I'm already doing some of these things. So yay, yay for me. I'm just going through my tech stack and I'm just doing a whole new round of market research to kind of get an idea. But I also am hearing, between what you and Erica both said, that a lot of the suggestions are really in alignment with personal finance recommendations. And so I'm wondering how many other things, right, that we talk about in personal finance are really applicable to preparing yourself for a recession as a business owner.
I kind of have I'm hearing something else. I 100% agree with you, though. I'm not disagreeing. So what I'm hearing though is we've got to do this thing, but what is it? How much is enough? How much should I have in that oh shit fund? And until you sit down, and you should definitely not wait until the old shit happens, you should absolutely be thinking about what could go wrong. So in my world, we call it a risk analysis, right? You're doing that constant check-in and that risk analysis saying, okay, what do I need to make to survive every day? This is my very minimum, right? And if I don't have that, I need to have at least that much to track myself for how many months? 3, 6? What is that number in your head? And then I've always been told, make sure you have a good relationship with your bank and your finance teams, because when you have a great relationship with them and you're keeping in touch with them, you're having those regular conversations, it's much easier to kind of say, hey, here's my future. These are the lines of credit I need to have in place, because you don't pay interest and you pay nothing unless you actually use it. But trying to get a line of credit at the last minute is not something that is easy to do. So you need to think about that way in advance. Now, this is just from business experience, but from a risk perspective, you could sit down and just say, list out everything that could possibly go wrong. Which client would you throw up, and which one would you celebrate if you lost? But what does that mean to the business, right? And what does that mean? And what is your mitigation plan? How am I going to pivot? Who am I going to go after? How do I need to diversify? What niche should I be building out next to ensure that I am diversified? So there's little pivots that you can take off of your current. People are asking you for things and services. Are you keeping track of them? There's scope creep. Someone was talking about packages. Was it Becky? Just packaging out your services or your products in a way that's a little smaller bites, that kind of, once you get in the door, they're never getting rid of you, right? Like, they're going to love you. They're going to fall in love with you. It's going to be great. But giving them something that they can kind of bite their teeth into and say, okay, yeah, let's just bring you in for that. And for me, it's maybe an initial forensic analysis just to kind of help you identify pain points within your business, so that so now you know where the gaps are. And not only do you know where the gaps are, but which of those gaps are having the biggest impact or could have the biggest impact to my business. So now you're focusing your mind and your resources to the thing that could have the biggest impact or is having the biggest impact to your business. So I go back to tracking the data, tracking my risk, understanding which ones are really likely to happen. And then, if out of the likelies, which one is going to have the most severity or impact to the business. And then I prioritize them accordingly. And so I'm a little bit of a data nerd. That's what I do. So that's where my brain automatically goes, is I start to think, and now I can say, okay, these are the different areas I'm going to go. I can put a little plan together, and I am ready for that recession because I've kind of thought 10, 20 steps ahead. So I think it goes beyond, yes, we need the money, but how much money do I need? And what is that based on?
I agree with a lot of what Val said, because I'm also a person who appreciates data, which money is already an emotional topic, even though we try to act like it isn't. So what I try to do, especially when I'm working with individuals and organizations, not too much on the small business, because I have a baseline expectation that when I work with business people that we're going to live in reality. We're not going to, we can do we can talk about feelings and our relationships with our clients, but the reality is, what does the data say? And so that goes back to what I said earlier about, well, we have these economic downturns regularly. So that is also data that we should be taking and processing into our business plan. We can't pretend that just because we got an LLC that everything is going to go smoothly from here on out. And I believe that because we get so passionate about our talents and our gifts and our prospects, that sometimes that passion overrides practical systems data analysis, having a regular cadence of I'm going to focus on this aspect of my business in July and October and January and in April. This is when I'm going to do this. And because we get wrapped up in the business, sometimes we don't take that step back as a business person and say, you know what, this customer is pretty consistent, but it takes a whole lot of resources to maintain this relationship. And should I shift that energy into nurturing relationships with these customers who might not have regular income, but they really are working with me? It's more of a collaborative spirit, and I can help them get to where they need to be financially so that they can leverage more of my products and services. So I think it's trying to find a way to process our emotions around our business and what it is that our vision is, taking that, and then also taking the data and knowing how to work the data, how to analyze the data and let the data inform us of where we should be putting our resources and maintaining that balance as a mother, as a person who sits on nonprofit boards. I mean, and I learned a lot of this sitting on nonprofit boards because we're talking about organizations trying to do a whole lot with a little. It's exhausting, frankly. It can get very tiring. And if you don't have a support system, a community like Sarah talks about, I really think that a lot of the answers we have are in a community where we can basically talk amongst each other on a regular basis and say, you know what? I never even thought about that. I'm going to start implementing that in my business. And someone says, oh, well, I'm going to send you these 3 links. This is how I got started. That is really what's going to help us all do more with the few resources that we have and to survive the downturns as we would do personally during a recession. Some people get roommates, things of that nature. We have to have that similar mindset when it comes to business, especially as small business women.
Yeah, Erica, you kind of nailed it, right? Like you're talking about data, having that visibility. And when you grow as a business and you're no longer the solopreneur, you've become a team. You've got more people surrounding you. They're all taking on parts of the business and they all have perspectives and ideas and so forth. And what I've witnessed on more times than I'd like to admit is instead of having the data organized, that really informs the visibility on the business decisions. The business decisions are determined by the person with the biggest political sway in the room or the person who's yelling loudest. And so as a woman, when I'm sitting in a room and if I try to lean in and my voice gets really loud, not loud as in volume wise, but I'm pushing back, I'm challenging, I'm questioning, that doesn't fall really well when I have a counterpart in the room, maybe has been with the business from the very beginning, has the ear of the leadership. It doesn't work as well. So for me, I learned a long, long time ago that as a female in corporate world, now I have my own business, that I have to come with the data and facts to tell the story. You cannot argue with data and facts. And not only that, but that allows you, back to what I said before, tells you where should we focus our this person could be talking about the sky is falling, but the sky is falling, sure. But it's a drop in the bucket. It's pennies to the business compared to this other issue that could destroy us and shut our doors. But we can't see that because if you're inside the business, to Erica's point, you can't see the trees among the woods. The data being organized in a way allows you to step out and visually see it within seconds, within minutes. And now you can make a business decision based on something, not based on power struggles or someone's self-agenda or whatever else that may be driving that.
This is so interesting to me. And I feel like I am processing a lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions, a lot of ideas. Like, I think that this is really helpful. Something else that has kind of come up for me, 2 things, and they're kind of related, is about still putting an emphasis on generating revenue generating activities. And I think that sounds like a duh, but we haven't said it. So I feel like it also kind of needs to be said. Val, you talked early on about like what other kind of niche or area or part of your business can you build up so that you've got these, not necessarily just multiple revenue streams, but multiple sort of targeted, I'll even say ideal clients or ideal contracts. Like, how do I make sure that and I think there's also something to be said for what other kinds of contracts could I be pursuing? Because somebody said also very early on, like, people are still spending money in a recession. There are still people who are looking for your services, but it might not be the same person, and or you might look at, of the people you are working with across different industries, what industry or market are they a part of that might be affected differently. So like, for example, during COVID, that was a tough time for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, right? But one of the things that exploded in popularity is podcasting. So I had started my business before COVID, but I was so thankful that I had, because I went from having to explain to people what a podcast was in order to sell the services in 2019 to all the way to 20, like just 1 year later, where people were then approaching me because at that time they didn't know other podcast producers, right? And I had already gotten results for people. So thankfully I'd already done that. But certainly at a time where a lot of people were facing a loss of income, my business exploded at that time, right? And so I think trying to pay attention to different industries and see like, how are different industries affected and who's not like a good ideal audience, and then who is a potentially good ideal audience, and doing networking and revenue generating activities in those places. But also, no matter how good or not the times are, never taking your foot off the gas in revenue generating activities, because you have to have a pipeline. And this is something I'm seeing some people come up against that I know, who were experiencing like a great golden era in their business, and they were feeling really good, and they're like, I have enough. This is enough. So now I'm no longer trying to generate new leads. And then they start to see that turnover because people are cutting spending, right? We're all looking to get leaner. So sometimes what gets cut is your services. And then you are looking at, okay, well, if I only need 5 clients, so I only had 5 clients, so my book of business was full, and then 3 of those clients turn over, you're now in a crisis situation, right? And so I think always making sure that we're creating a pipeline for ourselves kind of also just needs to be said.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Sarah, but it is really important, like when you're talking about the pipeline and revenue generating activities, and yet we're sitting here going, yeah, but I don't want to hire any more people yet, which requires you to have resources to take on more work. You might want to take a step back and say, well, what can I automate? What can I automate? And so many folks are so scared of AI and taking their jobs and so forth. And they say, well, the reason why we're in a labor crisis right now is because a few decades ago, everybody held everything really close to their chest and they didn't want to share knowledge. Well, the AI era is going to be the same thing. If you don't embrace it, then it will run you over. And so you need to start to figure out, how can I work smarter, not harder? How can I implement automations? My last corporate job before I launched my own business, I was hired to do one job. I automated it. And then I went and took on a gap that I saw in corporate, and I did that job and I automated it. I had 3 jobs. I even put it on my LinkedIn. I said, yes, this is 3 jobs, because I automated the first 2. I wasn't scared. I was just, I can do more, and we have a gap over here. And so I can manage this with a little bit of an automation. It takes some time to build it, but once it's built, it just runs on its own. So if you can take the time to build some automations, things that are repetitive, less emails, less notifications, less reminders, anything that you can build in that gives you more time to work on revenue generating activities, you should be implementing into your business. I know I could go really nerd out on that whole thing, but
I just wanted to piggyback too off of what you said, Sarah, because one of the things I wrote down a few notes for this, and one of the things I wrote down is like that never stopping mentality. Because what I see often happen is when there's a recession, and especially for newer business owners who haven't been through these sorts of things before, there will be this panic, and they will like maybe try to do all the things, and then they just sort of shut down, right? Like there's no business coming in and nobody's spending, like that defeatist kind of attitude, and they'll stop marketing, they'll stop doing anything, or one of the most common places people cut whenever there's a downturn is marketing. And it's just such a short-sighted approach because, in fact, I like to think of it as sort of like the stock market, buy low, sell high. When the economy is weak, that is the time to double down on your efforts, to be out there more, to be doing the things that better position you, that when the economy inevitably, and it will, rebounds, that you're the first person that's on someone's mind, that you are ready and that people are ready to work with you. So during this time, we shouldn't stop. And leading up to this, and in all times, we need to be working on that pipeline. But this is a time when I see people often starting to they're just like, well, there's no business out there. Nobody's spending, this sort of spirit that they get. And then they just sort of let off the gas. And I just think the businesses, I think one of the questions you would put that we might talk about was like, what are the things that some businesses do that make them more vulnerable in the recession or something like that? And I really feel like that's one of those. It's the people who are just, I got what I need, I'm happy, I don't ever need to find another client, right? Or during the recession, they're like, well, nobody's buying, so I'm just not going to really spend money on marketing. Either way, where they just sort of stop and aren't in that constant planting seeds mode. We need to be planting seeds all the time because they all, what's the word for when they come up, propagate? I don't know, but they all come up at different rates, right? And so planting seeds at all times is so important. Don't stop just because it's winter or just because it's whatever. Like, we got to be planting all the time because those seeds will eventually come up, and you want seeds coming up at different rates and different times. So just don't ever let your foot off the gas. That was so many mixed metaphors. Sorry.
No, I love what you're saying, Becky. I mean, to your marketing point, that goes back to the differentiation, right? So what niches do you have? And if you're a small business, you don't build them all out at once. You have your focus, but know what your next focus is going to be, right? And be ready to build them and have your marketing plan to launch them and have it on a schedule. And you're really always forward thinking. So you're always thinking today for 5 years, 10 years down the road. That's where my brain goes. I'm always probably 20 years ahead in my head, but that differentiator is absolutely 100% is what other niches. Diversification is the word I should be using. Right. Diversification is super huge, but then differentiating yourself. How are you differentiating yourself amongst your competition and making sure you have a strong marketing team who can help you support there? Because when the recession happens, it's not that they're not spending, they're just not there's less people spending. So hopefully you're the one they're calling when that time comes, right? So how are you differentiating? And then how are you diversifying?
Just so interesting. I think, what's coming up for me is number one, Becky, that question was, what are the signs that a business is not financially prepared for a recession? And I think when I wrote that, part of it is because in posing this question, there is a part of me that knows I do have a level of risk in my own business that I am not, I mean, I'm only coming up on 6 years in business, right? So like, it's still, I mean, a kindergartner, right? Like there's so much room for it to grow and to continue to get better and to scale and to be fortified. And I think I didn't go to business school. I am like learning. I went to a lot of other school, but I went to, I didn't learn how to do this in a way that, and I don't know that anybody really does. I don't know that's what they teach you at business school anyway. But I think that all of this to say, I think there is an insecurity sometimes that can come up in entrepreneurship where you're like, if anybody could see the part that's messy, then they would know I'm like a fraud, right? And that's where that imposter syndrome really comes in. When the reality is that of the things we're talking about, there are areas of opportunity for me to continue to grow and do better, but there are also a lot of things I am doing, and that's why I'm still in business, right? Like, so I think it's just kind of a funny question, but I love to Val really thinking about, and I know I've kind of harped on this, but really thinking about like, how can you diversify and differentiate? And there have been a few different kind of iterations of my business where I sort of tap into these markets where then you get introduced to this person, to this person, to this person, to this person. And you sort of find that like the bulk of your client, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but the bulk of your clients end up being sort of concentrated in a way. So I've had like an era of my business that was a lot of real estate podcasts. And so we kind of get to say now when we meet potential real estate podcasters, we're like, oh yeah, here's the experience we have in real estate, right? And I've listened to all of those episodes. So although I've never been a licensed agent, I know quite a lot about real estate. And then there's this era of my business that was really focused on pet businesses. I mean, we literally started attending pet business conferences and conventions and trade shows because it was like, we have actually several of these. So let's go ahead and like focus, like we can serve pet businesses. And now this year, although it's not the same thing, two interesting launches. One, of course, is Val's, but one is about AI and leveraging AI in your business and especially closing the gender gap for AI adoption. And then now Val, at the time that this launch will have been earlier this year, who is focused on like data centers and AI, right? So I think, again, closing the gender gap. So I think it's so interesting because these are areas that are only becoming more relevant. So it's like, okay, no matter what's going on with the next 6 months or the next 18 months, what I do know will be true in that time is that things like AI and data centers are still going to be the center of the conversation where those industries matter.
Well, here's the interesting thing about what you're saying, Sarah, is yes, AI is just now becoming a conversation, but AI was born in World War II. Okay, so if that's how long it's been around. Data centers, on the other hand, have been around for a really long time. I personally have been working in them for over 20 years. And to say nobody to this day could tell me, if I ask a random person in the street or even young people, what is the cloud? It's like such a mystery because data centers have been such a secret, closed, you don't want to know what that big gray building is thing. And we never talk about it because of security reasons and blah, blah, blah. But now with AI, it's sort of all open now. And everybody's starting to ask a lot of questions and they're getting built everywhere, including your backyard and your communities, right? It's not going anywhere unless AI dies tomorrow, which it won't. So it's just one of those growth things. Like you always kind of have to be looking to the future because I think things have been around you. There's like signs and symptoms. They've been around you, whether you notice them or not. You just have to kind of start noticing when people start talking about little things. You're like, oh, that's interesting. That's a trend. Maybe I should see how I can get into that earlier rather than when everybody else is talking about it.
What other kind of industries come up for you all when you're thinking about like right now, we're recording this in 2025, right? So AI is definitely a big one that has been a huge topic of conversation. I think also streaming, which is related, is a huge part of it. I think tech in general has been for a while and like digitizing things, and automation kind of related to AI. These are kind of some subject matter. I know, Val, you also mentioned government contracts that with ebbs and flows in the economy, you see maybe some differences in opportunities for contracts that are available and different kind of, I guess I'll say, symptoms of how a government operates for what contracts might be available. But what other kind of industries are you seeing in your own work for anybody on this call of like what's growing right now?
Well, because of AI, I would say that some things that are growing that maybe aren't that visible to the normal consumer are like financial services, like so fintech, right? 20 years ago, we had banks. We didn't have Cash App is not a bank. PayPal is not a bank. Like fintech, like what is that? Now we have a middle person between us and our money. But that's because those companies knew how to assess people's behaviors and then find a way, we could probably get them to buy more stuff. Since we're constantly scraping their devices and we know what they paused on for 5 seconds or what they paused on for 10 seconds. And so now we found a middle layer to connect the technology to the finances. And so there are lots of large traditional banks, traditional financial services companies that are leveraging that sort of technology to curate stuff. Okay, so we grew up in the ages, and to some point, we still get ads out of the mailbox every week. Oh, we get ads, and pretty much everybody gets the same ads. But if you have an app or if you have a loyalty card, you get ads that are particularly for the things that you buy. And so with AI, the whole point really of AI and machine learning is to curate everyone's experience. So for me, I'm going to get ads about dogs. I'm going to get ads about corgis. I'm going to get ads about skincare, things that I pause on, things that I'm interested in. Other people are going to get ads about cats and summer camps for their children. And so again, as we were talking about earlier in the marketing arena and specifically for nurturing relationships with maybe new customers, this is exactly what's happening to us now. Now, the people who we buy stuff from, we've always bought food from Fry's or Kroger. Now Fry's has figured out, yeah, Erica's probably not going to buy that peanut butter every month, but she might buy it every 3 months because we figured out that she doesn't eat the peanut butter. She uses the peanut butter as a vehicle to give her dog meds. So now we're going to pull back. Now we're going to serve her Cheez-Its and Goldfish by the bushel. But we're only going to sell her peanut butter coupons every 3 months. Or yeah, it's around the holidays. She's going to make macaroni and cheese. So we're going to make cheese expensive for everybody else. But for Erica, we're going to give her coupons for all the cheese because she's going to use all the cheese and everything dairy to put in this macaroni and cheese. So in terms of what Valerie was talking about earlier, of people kind of being maybe slow to adopting AI, the power in AI, like she says, the data is you using the data that we're all putting out there all the time. People always talk about, oh, they're using our data. Well, that's because you're using their platforms for free. Okay. So Facebook has to pay for the servers somehow. And that's why you're getting a lot more ads now and everything else, because they're like, oh, we spent all this time giving you this service for free. And we found out everything that you like. We know where you went to school and when your high school reunion is coming up and where your best friend lives. And so now we're monetizing that based on ads and things of that nature. So we need to take that same attitude with AI and says, okay, like Sarah mentioned, so what type of industries are coming up, are on the cusp of being big? Well, you know what? I'm going to let AI tell me about that.
Well, I can tell you.
Well, and I was also going to say, I would say, because part of my issue with AI is what it's doing to the environment. But HVAC systems, if you have a child who doesn't want to go to college, I would put them in the HVAC or refrigeration program, because with data centers, you're always going to need people around to do that type of work.
Yeah, I would put them into 2-year college programs to operate the data centers. So one of the things that we've done a really bad job of is, because data centers are so secret, one of the big things that are growing right now is cybersecurity. So not only going into cybersecurity, but also you could also go into data center operations. But what Erica was talking about was actually machine learning. So what's happening is the machine actually learns all the things and takes in all of the data, and then the AI spits out the analysis of all of that data that the machine learning did. So they are two different things. And so that's what we're talking about is you can start collecting your data and organizing your data in a way that every time a scope creates, every time a new contract, the more you can collect about your clients, the more you can learn, and then you can actually pull out trends and future analysis with the AI services. So one of the big things that are coming out right now is, I would say the cybersecurity is a really big thing. Not that anybody wants to just suddenly pivot into cybersecurity, but if you're looking for jobs, that's a good one. I think that we need to be paying attention to blockchain and digital assets, because the one thing the AI is missing for us to be a holistically digital free system is really the digital assets, which was signed in by Trump in April. So Bitcoin is officially a form of money. So I think that we all as a business need to be thinking about the adoption of Bitcoin and blockchain tech, and how that's really going to reshape our future.
Val, I have to say, I already, of course, know how impressive you are, but I think that one thing that's so impressive about what you just said is that after I posed the question, I did ask ChatGPT, and so many of the things that ChatGPT spat back are the things that we've already discussed on here. AI and automation, cybersecurity is on here, healthcare and health tech, green tech, sustainability solutions, fractional leadership and outsourced operations, because hiring freezes equal an outsourcing boom, logistics and supply chain tech. Katrina, this made me think of you. E-learning and B2B training, gov tech and procurement friendly solutions or services, which is literally where you started, Val, at the beginning of this conversation. Enterprise podcasting and internal comms.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. B2B wellness and culture tools. And then I said, can you give me 10 more and specifically think about communities, like within communities and serving geographic areas, just to diversify the list. So it's not just more like tech related answers. And it says municipal infrastructure and economic development, disaster preparedness, climate resilience and emergency planning, local education systems and ed tech partnerships. There you go again, Katrina. Construction and trades business services, community banking and credit unions, Main Street revitalization and small biz advocacy, tourism, arts and culture, food systems and local agriculture, public health and community wellness coalitions, and local media alternatives and community storytelling, because so many news sources are shuttering. So,
wow, the one you didn't think, and maybe you did, I just missed it, but I'm really surprised it's not on that list. And should be, because of our power restraints. And the reason why we can't build data centers fast enough is because of our power restraints, is the sustainability. And
yeah, she did mention that.
Oh, okay. She did here. Okay. I missed that one. I was just like, I'm surprised that's not on the list. Like that. That's my world every day.
Super interesting to me. So I hope that as we're coming up against time, I hope that if you're listening, and also those of you on the call, that this feels kind of inspiring because I definitely feel lit up of like, there are things that I can still be doing. It's not too late for me to start doing some things to fortify my business further. Also, not doing everything wrong. There's things that are already going well. And then third of all, like, look at, to what Becky and I were saying, look at all of these opportunities to continue pumping the gas and to continue pumping the gas is a weird way to say that. Continue putting your foot to the pedal, right? Like to continue to push forward. I want to say this every single time I record a Big Brave Business episode. I was reflecting as we transitioned into season 3. So I've been writing a lot of posts about it because we're recording this in May. Season 3 started airing in May. And this work on this podcast is the work I am proudest of in my whole life. I think bringing people together like you all and having conversations like this, it feels important and it feels like it matters. And the core values alignment with the folks that are contributing and building out this kind of community here. You're just exactly the type of people I want to be friends with. I want to learn from, I want to hire, I want to refer business to, and that I would love to work with or would love to get referrals from. Like this is the thing. This is the community. And I feel like it just continues to get better and better. And I leave feeling so inspired after every single one of these conversations, because the contributions from the people on these calls is just tremendously valuable. So thank you so much for being here and for just an incredibly brave and big conversation. And again, just to reiterate, everyone on this call, their bio and their links are in the description of the episode. So please make sure you go and connect and check out all of the cool things that we are all still doing, because we're not giving up even when times are tough or chaotic. So yes, please. And thank you so much to you listening for being here with us and for going here with us. If there's anything that's come up for you that you want to share, I know our DMs are open for all of us, and we'd love to hear from you and chat with you and strategize with you and hear your ideas. And yeah, I will see you here next week.